This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. You are special. We have two different shows called Avoid the Maze. One is just Avoid the Maze, that's your life journey. But Avoid the Maze, you are special. Typically, are individuals like my guest today who have taken personal situations and are letting them improve upon themselves and helping others improve themselves. Now, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with any of us, but you know what? If we want to be our best, we have to keep making the changes. You know, John, as I've read your bio, um, there's so much in there, and
Yeah,
which is a good thing. There's nothing bad
been a
with
long
that.
35 years.
But sometimes when we read a bio or we go to put together our own bio, we don't realize all the steps we've taken in our journey that have gotten us to where we
Mhm.
are today. And I'm sure
Agreed.
somewhere along the line, you probably thought, that you felt stuck, that you weren't going to be able to get to where you had hoped to be. So let's start from the beginning. What was it that got you into the position where you now are taking your knowledge and helping support others?
Yeah, first of all, Karen, thank you for having me. Um, it really all came down to when I was 22. Uh, I had an injury, and this injury was the icing on the cake, I would call it, after many, many years of up and down traumas, learning disabilities. And I told myself I had to figure out why all of this was happening to me. And I vowed to myself that there was a purpose for why everything happened to me. And I vowed that I would do everything I can to make a change in society for mental health. I was very passionate about mental health. Um, so after I graduated college, I went and started right with NAMI, New Jersey, National Alliance for Mental Illness. So just a quick background on myself. Um, so when I was younger, everything kind of already started with learning disabilities. So the learning disabilities are still here today, and they're being more and more exposed to different work environments, which is very challenging for me. But those learning disabilities back then, as a kid, people don't realize how hard it is, how hard it is to be in school, being taken out of class and put into a class of five, learning how to read and write by the age of in fourth grade. Um, People just focus on the disability, and especially back in the 90s, people didn't necessarily focus on the impact that it would have emotionally.
Right.
Also taking medicine, so all started then. Um, then everything kind of started going downhill, ups and downs. My grandma I was very close to then passed away unexpectedly with a heart attack. That was very difficult, and I became good friends with my grandpa, and he was became my rock because when I was in third grade, I was diagnosed with osteochondritis disease in my knee. The only thing is that we didn't find that out until I was in fifth grade. I injured my knee and it continued to swell. And we went to doctor after doctor. And I always look back and I'm like, oh, it's so easy to find doctors. But then I remember this was in like 97. So there was no internet. There was no anything. It was like you go to your pediatrician and you just hope for the best.
Right.
So my mom, we took me to all over the place. I MRIs after MRIs. And what happened is I was on crutches for about 2 years, like on and off. And so that really limited me to being a kid and somebody with learning disabilities and struggling in school. That is your outlet, being outside playing. And I lost that. And I hung out with my grandpa a lot. And so, I was trying to replace that feeling. Then, time came around fifth grade. Um, we finally got that diagnosis of osteochondritis, except that summer going into sixth grade when I was supposed to have the surgery. Um, I remember my mom asking me if I wanted to come down the shore because they lived down the shore near the beach. Um, my grandpa called and he wasn't feeling well. And of course, I went. And so we ended up bringing him to the hospital. He had extremely high blood pressure. The doctor said he would be okay, um, but then he wasn't. He had a brainstem stroke, but I was there by myself with him because the doctor said, he's going to be okay. So my parents went and just went to go get food. And during that time, heard his last words and literally was like just begging for a cup of water, his lips so chapped. And then he just kind of faded away. And then he ended up going into the ICU. And I remember, you know, uh, literally talking to the nurses as if I'm an adult, as a fifth, as like becoming a sixth grader, trying to tell as much as possible about him. And then he ended up going on like the respirator, and
Mhm.
so in a way, he was alive for a few more days, but also he died that day,
Right.
and that was so traumatic for me. So the combination of me not being able to go out and play because of my knee, and then that occurring was just the icing on the cake, where in sixth grade, everything began to fall apart. Um, I even got the surgery eventually. Um, and this is just to show you how what my luck is like. I went to go get the surgery and I had an infected toenail and they couldn't even perform the surgery. Instead, they performed a surgery on my toenails to make sure that, that these ingrowns don't happen again.
Oh
So
my
it's just
God.
like a constant battle of ups and downs. And I just kept fighting and fighting. And then eventually I got the surgery. But then it was just like, okay, you got the surgery. Now it's months and months of rehab. So it was just eventually I kept fighting and I got back. But when I got back, uh, really, during my sixth grade year, I began self-harm. I began cutting. That became my outlet. I loved it so much. It was such a relief for me. And sometimes people don't really understand why somebody would cut themselves, but people don't realize how powerful it is and how much just feeling that tension, that pain is better than feeling the pain inside. So everything began falling apart. I began having suicidal ideation, talking about suicide a lot, talking about death a lot. And it was I remember we were trying to sell my grandparents' house, and my sister at that time, like a couple nights before doing that, she found me in the kitchen grabbing a knife, and she was like, "Why are
Oh,
you grabbing a knife?" And I was just like, she ended up seeing my arm and she ended up telling my mom. And then my mom, who is a social worker, and she is like the light in all of this, because she was able to navigate these systems and help me. So she was like, I'm going to bring you to a psychiatrist. And obviously I didn't want to go, but I ended up getting put on medicine. And then that was really this downfall. And what occurred was I stopped caring. I stopped caring about everything in life. I was tired. I couldn't take just working to get back up just to be knocked back down. And it just was crushing. And at the end of sixth grade, everything fell apart on a ride home from Boston, looking at colleges for my brother. I had a breakdown, and that was when I was first hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital for 3 weeks, uh, which is a whole other story for another time. But that was an experience, especially in sixth grade. People don't realize what it's like. I always tell people, you don't realize how much you grow up when you're in those situations. In sixth grade, people aren't learning. I used to see my friends hanging out with girls, doing this, doing kid stuff. Instead, I was in group therapy, listening to other people talk about the most traumatic stuff, even girls who got literally physically abused, sexually abused.
sure.
So I'm learning all of this stuff, and it's just like shit. Like I, I'm I'm like how old? I'm like 12 years old, and so it was traumatic by itself being in these hospitals. So I got out of that hospital, and then a week later I got put into another hospital because it's just I it's people don't realize, you go into these hospitals, it's not like going into a medical hospital where it's
Right.
like you go in with COVID, and then all of a sudden you leave and you're feeling great. It's not like that. So in that hospital, I used to be put in padded rooms. I used to be put in there for overnight because I would fight with my roommate. I spent over 16 hours in a padded room with a locked window, a locked door. Um, and I would find ways to create pain. I would have rug burn on my knuckles. I would do anything just to try and feel better. Uh, so after that experience in those hospitals, um, I continued to work with a psychiatrist and try and get on medicine that worked. I was going to different therapists, but come on, I'm a therapist right now. And, I work with kids and I just look at them and at 12 years old, and I'm just like, I can't even force these kids to do something because I was in those shoes and I didn't want to do anything. And people don't realize that, like, you're just not ready when you're that younger. You don't know about life. So eventually, seventh grade was a torturous year. Cops being called on me to my house, the suicide ideation, and then eventually, finally, during that year, um, towards well, actually, I'm sorry, I everything kind of was starting to come back together. I was being able to play with my friends, go out, and then the basically November of my seventh grade year, I was playing football and I got hit by my friend, perfectly legal, everything was fine, and I fractured my growth plate and I was back on crutches.
Oh,
And then I just went downhill from there and I just stopped. I was just done. And so that year was just constant trouble in school. The school really didn't want me. I was getting kicked out because because I was talking about suicide, and I needed a doctor's note to come back in. Uh, but eventually, I got put on a medicine called lithium, and over time, in that seventh grade, and towards the end, in that summer, the lithium actually started helping, and it started helping to balance me out. Was I feeling perfect? No, but at least I felt a little bit more regulated. Um, so what was great about that is I worked on the boardwalk with my cousin who owns a pizzeria. I was finally feeling like a kid again, right? So then, eighth grade comes around and I'm in my IEP meeting and the school really wants me to go to a residential home. But thank God for my parents and my dad for sticking up and saying, if you went through everything he went through, I'm sure you would be in the same position. And that he needs to stay in this school and not be put somewhere else.
sure.
So literally the school, put out like a warning to all the teachers about me, making, them aware of my behavior. But eighth grade actually turned out to be a really great year. Uh, I started feeling good. Um, I love sports, and because of my ups and downs, I was never really able to play consistently. And eventually, my friends, started playing lacrosse, and then I joined, and lacrosse became my outlet. People think I'm a little nuts because I was a goalie, and literally getting hit by the ball
Right.
caused pain. So it was like a legal way to feel pain and just have that release. And I became really, really good at being a goalie. People didn't realize really the what was behind it. But after I remember eighth grade was finished, and I remember a teacher coming up to me and she said, "I'm glad you proved them wrong." And I was like, "What?" "I'm glad you proved them wrong, that you were a great student. You did well. You weren't a problem, like they said." Um, so it was just that really helped. So this is, just the story of my life. That summer going into freshman year, I was like, all right, let me please, I'm going to start fresh. I get to go to high school. I get a new start, right?
Right.
I get to play like lacrosse with my friends, work on the boardwalk. July 4th that summer, the beach was beautiful. There was dolphins. There was just everything there. And, and that night with my obviously Italian family, you just think about how much food was there, but of course there wasn't ice cream. And we needed to go get ice cream from this great place. So me, my uncle, my other uncle, my aunt, and two cousins packed in. It was just a beautiful night. Literally like a 7 minute, 7 minute drive. Some kid ran a stop sign, hit us on the side, car flipped over 3 times. My leg got crushed under the car. I was stuck under the car. Um, I remember waking up to my aunt saying, I don't want to go out this way. And there was so much blood just dripping. I mean, this was like easily an accident where people could have died. Um, and and the interesting thing is, why was I the one that was most hurt? I spent that summer in the hospital,
Oh,
basically the whole summer. I had something called I had a damage to the back of my leg that actually like basically decayed, like rotted from the inside out. And doctors like were like, "Oh no, it's fine, it's fine." And then, it became like a scab, and then all of a sudden it like bursted, and I had all these stitches in my leg and my back, uh, and then all of a sudden it bursted, and then I had to go to another hospital, and that doctor told me to go home and clean it with like a sponge. It'll be fine. And then eventually it started like, I hate to say, it started smelling like rotten fish. I ended up going to the lawyer that we had. He said, go see this doctor. I went to that doctor. He was like, you coming in right at the right time, because if you waited any longer, who knows what could have happened to your leg.
oh,
So I spent you know, I had surgeries right after the accident, taking glass out of my body. And then now I have at least like 6 or 7 surgeries um, for this wound in the back of my leg, except this wound was so large that I needed to get a skin graft. And so now I had to get that skin graft. And I'll never forget having that skin graft and the pain that I had when they took the skin off my other leg was so painful. It just felt like somebody was just lighting a fire on your leg, and it was just constant burning, burning, burning. And you're in the hospital for a while. Your parents have to work. So I
sure.
was there by myself, and so I call my dad, and he comes, but it was just so painful. But I told myself I'm going to get back to playing lacrosse. Um, and I did everything I could that year to get myself back. I started high school in a wheelchair. Um, I just kept going to physical therapy, and then on top of it, because you're dealing with a lawyer and stuff like that. Um, you can't necessarily go play sports because they want to make sure they're sure you're not hurting yourself
Right,
more.
exactly.
Um, so, uh, but I told my mom, I don't care about a lawsuit, whatever, just get it done. I don't care. So I got a garbage amount of money, but at the end of the day, all I cared about was getting back to playing. So that freshman year of my life, it was me hiding my feelings from all of the pain, feeling like I just got knocked down again, and now I have to fight my way back again. And and I did, and I just focused on that. So that was, a really, critical time for me. But then sophomore year came around. Me and my friends started a lacrosse program in my town. Uh, but now my mental health is really falling apart, and it becomes winter time during the break, and I just break. And I remember sitting at the table, and I dump out a bottle of pills, and it's not necessarily that I was going to do it, but the intent, the want to do it was so much there. And my sister walks in and then calls my mom because they were out, and that was the beginning of, I would say, the rise in a way. I got put into a partial hospital program where I was basically taken out of school for 5 months. And it took me a really long time during those 5 months to really start to work on myself. I spent the first couple months not saying a word. I got put in hospitals for cutting again. I just didn't care. I did not care at all. My behavior was off the wall. I did not care. But at that hospital, I remember talking to one of the nurses, and she talked to me about, you know, at that hospital, a lot of the kids that were in there were from DIFUS, which is a child protective
Right.
service. And because there's not places to put them, they just put them in hospitals. So I'm experiencing all of these different types of people, not like the older other hospitals where it was just mental health. This is behavior. This is like, my roommate was selling drugs on the street. Um, so this nurse really explained to me about like just how fortunate I am, what I have, and that I need to really think about where I want to go in life. And I found a social worker that was really great, and she ended up really helping me. And I worked on myself. Got back to the program. I worked on myself so much, it was so tiring. And I tell people there is nothing more difficult than working on yourself in therapy, and truly working on yourself in therapy, reliving everything, reliving being with my grandpa at the hospital, reliving just the car accident, reliving the pain that I had. And you just have to relive it because you need to heal from it. And that was just extremely beat me up. But at the end of it, I remember one of the nurses saying, "John, you're going to go back to school, and you're going to feel a lot more mature than other people, and it's okay to feel that. And you might not feel it right away, but you will, because what you went through and what you've done now by healing has it has helped you grow
Right.
tremendously." And when I got back to school, nobody ever talks about what it's like to get back to school after being out for 5 months for a psychiatric problem, which is a whole other issue even today. Um, but those 2 years, junior year, I was going to therapy. I was feeling good. I finally, was playing lacrosse. Me and my friends, we started having seasons since we just started the program, and I became really, really good at being a goalie. So I finally felt like I was part of something. I finally felt like, hey, this is what life is supposed to feel like. This is what it's all about. And I had a IEP since I was really young, and my mom and the social worker, it's always funny because they cared more about me getting my life back together than me doing well in school. Because at the end of the day, you can always take school.
Right.
But if I didn't get myself put together at that time, I don't know where I would be. So I just became, when I got back to school junior year, it was a little rough. Me and my friends, we started drinking a while back. And so now, like, there's parties going on and everything. And, I'm having fun. Uh, but, now I feel like I feel good though. And, going into senior year, that's when I truly made this change that literally so was life changing. I started running. I lost weight because I was often overweight. I still am, and I can't get back. I'm trying to lose that weight, but it was just so, and then we had SATs. I barely passed the SAT. I barely broke. Maybe I got like an 850 or 900. I mean, it's there, but nobody really cared because I was finally having
Right.
fun. And if I needed to go to a community college, great. So that season, we did well. We won our conference to championship. It was great. It was like I was finally living this life that was like meant to be. It was just meant to be. And so then, there was a school called Kane University that was really close to where I live and grew up. Um, but, it was a school where people didn't want to go to because, that's a school like right next to us. And it's not that good of a school compared to all these other ones my friends were getting into, because all my friends were super smart and they were getting into great schools. And here I am just struggling to get into Kane, which has an extremely high acceptance rate. And I remember, the school and the guidance counselors speaking on my behalf, uh, and helping me get in. And I got into the school on this in this program that basically gives people the passport program that basically gives people a second chance when they aren't doing when they're right on the fence.
Right.
So they give you that chance. I got to play lacrosse in college. uh, I was a walk-on because I wasn't recruited. So I still had this chip on my shoulder that I was going to show people how great I am at it. Because that was my life. I always had to prove myself. There was no way around it. And then so I was in college. College was interesting. I struggled with girls. I struggled talking with girls, talking because people don't realize my life was made up of lacrosse, of mental health, trauma, and lacrosse.
Right.
I didn't know how to talk to people. Like literally, going on a date, like I didn't know what to talk about. So I just talk about mental health. So who the hell in their right mind wants to talk about mental health when you're in college,
Right.
especially back then, right? In 2008, 2007. And so I really stayed to myself. I had a great time. People loved me. I loved all my teammates. It was great. I had a great time. I became really good at lacrosse. The first 2 years of lacrosse, I didn't get to play. And I remember my sophomore year, I was going to have an opportunity because the starting goalie got hurt. But it's a back and forth thing. Obviously, I was happy that he was able to come back, but also it was like disappointment again,
Sure.
another set of disappointment. And I remember we made it to the conference finals that year, and everyone running to the goalie because that's what happens when you win. And I really didn't run because I sat there and I said, "That's what I want. That's what I want." And I said, I have my junior year and my senior year, and I'm going to prove it. I'm going to get there. Um, and so, I practice. Junior year, I got the starting spot. I became a captain. Uh, my coach realized, and saw my growth and potential. And, my junior year, I also broke my thumb in preseason. So that was devastating because they were telling me I couldn't play. But you want to know something? I told them, I said, I don't care what happens to me. I am playing because I am not losing another chance. And so they wrapped it up. They gave me a cast, and I kept playing. Uh, I played lights out that year. I was feeling so good. We made it to the conference finals. We lost by one, and I was just like crushed, right? But I was like, I still got my senior year to do this. All right, I got this. Um, School in general, I was going back and forth between business and psychology because I was so passionate about mental health and everything. But I went down the route of business out of fear and also just, safety, I feel, because going into that other field is like, it's challenging, it's
Sure.
not like business where you just go get a job and it's like you just learn on the job. So I went that route, and that was fine. Senior year came around. Um, During 2 days before Thanksgiving, me, my brother, and my sister went into the city to go see a little concert. Um, I packed my bag from my house that I live in, my college house, and I brought it home. And I take all my medication because I'm taking like 6 medications at this time, right? I have a cocktail of medicine, so it's a decent amount because it's like multiple pills for each
Sure.
drug. Uh, I put it in my bag, and then I'm home. We come home at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I had one drink. I was not because I barely drank when I was in college because I was so dedicated to lacrosse. Um, and then what I did is I just thought there was one pill bottle in there, like, and so I just took it and slung it back. And I didn't think you think twice about how many were in there. Um, so I ended up overdosing on Adderall and basically having my blood pressure through the roof, uh, being taken to the hospital, having my stomach pumped. Ended up in the ICU for 3 days. They pumped me up with so much Ativan that it was like to put like, enough to put a horse down because they needed to slow down my heart rate and everything. So I was in the ICU for 2 or 3 days, and that was life changing, and it really impacted me. And the funny thing is a week before that happened, I got nominated for preseason All American, and I was like, "Yo, I got this. This is it." And but once again, I told myself, I don't give a crap what happens to me. I'm not stopping. I'm going to play. So I went back to playing for that in that season. It was a fun season. It was a good season. It just felt good, to be there. And I knew that this was my last chance to win that championship and be that person, that goalie that everyone jumps on. And then what happened is during one of the games, it was like maybe like 5 games left in the season, six. I took a shot to the testicles area, and I continued to play. It hurt really bad. I actually ended up going to the bar and getting a beer with my buddies. And this team that we played was the team, our rival team that we would play in the championship all the time. So I was like, yo, I don't care about pain. Pain was nothing to me. I didn't care, even a pain there. But then I was having a beer, and then I couldn't sit down. And then all of a sudden I realized that my balls turned into a softball.
Oh,
And then I was brought to the hospital again for emergency surgery. And basically that was, crushing. But I said, I'm going to get back. I'm going to get back because there's still games. And literally the day before we made it to the conference championship, the day before the conference championship, I went to the doctor because it would have been like 3.5 weeks, 3.5 weeks. And I remember being like, Doc, I got a cup now, because back then, like they didn't tell you in lacrosse to wear this big cup. But I got this now hockey cup that literally I always say I can get run over by a truck and like everything will be fine. Um, so the doctor comes and he's like, oh yeah, I'm not making this call because I was saying how passionate I am about this game. So he brings in another doctor and he says, I can't, you need another week or two to heal. And I was crushed because you think you have more time, you think you have another chance, and in reality, you don't. And I realized that. And so now I had to watch from the sideline, and my team lost. Uh, my coach always says I would be the difference maker, and I do believe that because we've lost to that team. Well, the first time we lost 6-4. In the championship junior year, we lost 7-6. In this regular season that year, the senior year, we lost 7-6, and then I couldn't play that final game, which was crushing. So I luckily we had like ECACs, which was like a side championship, and my coach was very like John. He was like, John, you have to just finish out your career playing. Like because I was able to play. I got cleared finally. One of the biggest regrets I have is listening to the doctors. Listening to the doctors. I should have just played. I regret it to this day. But anyways, I got to play. We won this little championship. It was great to be able to play. I'm glad we did it. It was very fulfilling. And even though it wasn't the same, at least it did give me some type of peace.
sure.
Um, so now after that year, I'm going to go into business. Used to practice lacrosse like 5, 6 hours a day. I was nonstop. So now what am I supposed to do with 5 or 6 hours a day? So I told myself, this is it. I'm going to start my passion. And I called up NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, the Union County chapter. And I met this nice older lady, probably like 70, 60, 65 years old, because everybody that volunteered there was older. And I was just like, I want to be part of this. I want to make a change. I had to take an extra semester of school, and I took a mental health class. So I was starting partnerships between NAMI and Kane University. I had the opportunity to go to a prison and go into a cell in that class, which was like really life changing. I had to sit down with two murderers basically and hear their story and be able to talk to them, which looking back added so much value to like knowledge and like understanding. Um, then after I graduated that year, it was it. I was volunteering, and then I was able to get a job in corporate America. I became a consultant, a process consultant, and you know, it was not easy because I had these mental health problems, I had these learning disabilities, but you can't say anything, right? Because if you say something, you know it's going to backfire on you.
Right.
So I didn't, I kept it to myself. I struggled the first few projects. But then eventually I got on this project that became a long-term project for like 4 years, 3 years. Um, and that changed my life because it allowed me to do and lead a lot of projects, tech implementations. I mean, I learned a ton and I had a lot of responsibility and it was great. I even met my wife there, so, things were great. And then when I got done with that project, I was like, what was I, like 25, 26. Um, and then I went get back to the firm where like, and I'm lost. I don't really have a place because I've been away for so long. Um, and that was really challenging. I used to run a lot, and this is the biggest icing on the cake. And this is where I knew like my life had a purpose. Um, when I was 27 or 28, I remember running and running, and my hip started hurting. My hip started hurting. And eventually I couldn't really move it too well. I ended up having to get a partial hip replacement at 28 years old. And I was like, who the hell gets a hip replacement at 28 years old? And so that is, I got that done. I had hip resurfacing. And, then after that, it was hard to really get back into work. I did start looking for jobs. I hustled. I for a year and a half, I was looking for jobs, and I would make it to final rounds, and I just never got hired. And I was becoming so desperate because I needed to switch jobs. So what I did is I even took the opportunity to self-disclose at work just to feel what it's like and to understand the process because I told myself I want to improve it. And the best way to improve things is by living it. Um, so, eventually, I just kept fighting. I was traveling around the country doing projects. And then all of a sudden, that what is it, like March comes around, 2020. And I remember, you know, I used to write tons of stuff because during those 10 years, like basically like 8, 9 years in corporate America, I volunteered so much. I went and I built networks. I presented. I was big in lived experiences, all of that stuff. I was nonstop. And then when I realized, when I was like towards the end of my career, I was like, my mental health network is bigger than my business network. And so I was just desperate at that time. I was broken. I kept getting rejected, rejected. And so eventually I got laid off because of COVID. And I remember, I was just like, what am I going to do? And I had gone to Columbia a few times, Columbia University, to be like a guest lecturer at one of the classes. And, um, and basically I told myself, and I regret it to this day that I really didn't talk to my wife enough about it. But I was just so desperate and crushed inside. I didn't know what to do. And it just felt right to go to my passion because I looked at COVID and I was like, yo, this is an opportunity. And I vowed to myself, so I write stuff in my phone because I believe in manifestation. And I have all of these notes all the way back to 2020. And I wrote in the note, I said, yo, why everyone is focused right now on mental health and focused on solutions for today. I said, I'm going to build something that is for the future, that is going to fit the future, that is going to fit the needs of the future. And so I went back to school. I told myself, if I, I just told myself, if I apply to Columbia University. This kid who has learning disabilities failed, barely got past his SATs, this and that. Um, if I get in, then it's meant to be. And I got in. And, it was just really hard at that time. And like I said, I really feel bad not talking enough about it, because it did alter me and my wife's life, because I went back to school and it's still challenging today. I mean, 4 years later, because of just the field is very challenging. Like, for instance, I'm trying to get my LCSW right now, but I'm not allowed to see clients, who have insurance. But what's unfair is that if you think of a resident in the hospitals, they're allowed to see clients, the patients who have hospital like insurance, and our field is just equivalent to that, right? I should be able to learn and get that experience. So I went back to school, and that changed everything because everything that happened in my life, social work school put it into perspective and was the healer. And I was very passionate about mental health in the workplace. And I designed a whole program, a huge program called Differently at the time. And it was a workplace solution that I still believe today will work will work. But yeah, but when I got out of school, uh, I realized I didn't have the opportunity to do that because who
Sure.
was I? I was just this random person. So I ended up, going into program management. I worked for NAMI, New Jersey. I designed programs for teachers. It was really fun and great. And then finally, I passed my LMSW test after 3 times because it's because of just that's who I am. And then that's kind of brought me to where I am today. But during all of those years, I never stopped thinking
And
about how to change
and that
society.
and that's what the important piece is. Not everybody has that will and energy to do that. Um, but when they can hear your story and say, okay, well, John did it. I don't know if I can do it, but unless you take the first step, you don't know. And you kept
Exactly.
taking those first steps.
Yeah.
Um, Mental health back in the 90s, we didn't really talk about it too much. In fact, if you brought up those words, people looked at you as if, oh, you need to be locked up and put away. And I'm sure that's how you felt. Um, you know, our peers didn't understand what we were going through. Um, I saw it in my own son was who's on the autism spectrum,
Mhm.
very high functioning, but people looked at him and said, "You're mentally ill." And he went, "I'm only mentally ill when you push me off the ledge, really."
Yep.
Um, and he had to prove himself. And
Yep.
so when I read your bio, I saw a lot of him in you, that you can be crushed, you can be told you can't do it, you can be in the midst of horrible, horrible things. But
Mhm.
there's something that triggers you and says, even though I may not think I want to live, I'm going to take that next step because
Yeah.
I really don't want to die. I may not
Yeah.
want to live. I don't want to die.
Yeah.
So, how can my listeners find you, follow you, and get more insight from you?
So, we just launched differently like 4 months ago. So we're still trying to get the word out about it. We're running into a lot of challenges about people don't know what social work is. So when we're trying now, we offer access to social workers for the everyday person, which has never been done before. But people don't know what social work is. That there's over 15 different types of social workers. So what people can do is we started putting out webinars, and we're going to start putting out more and more webinars. Social media, we put out a ton of stuff, and we just keep trying to grind away at it. But I need to get my voice out there more, and that is how listeners are going to be able to learn, because once I start speaking more openly, about this stuff. I've just been so busy working 4 jobs right now, trying to like just manage my life, that I just haven't had the energy. But I just never stopped. But yeah, I mean, just check out differently.net, diffrently. And I'll tell you, there's no E in there because when I was had learning when I growing up, my learning disabilities, I never heard that E. So the name of the company actually reflects learning disabilities.
Well, we will put all that information in the show notes. So hopefully our listeners will reach out to you. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you for sharing your story because your story is extremely important.
Thank you for having me. Oh, and by the way, within the next couple of years, I did write a book. I wrote a memoir during my 10 years in corporate America. So I will hopefully have that published one day if somebody realizes my story is actually worth it. I just want to say thank you for having me, and hopefully we can, do this again and focus more on differently and talk about that. But I am honored and grateful for being on here with you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye
Take
now.
care. Thank you.